Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kumar Neeraj Sachdev, and I appear before you to present my paper in the Eurasia Research Online Live International Conference on Social Science and Humanities that is being conducted on 21st July 2023. The title of my paper is Understanding the Need for Interpretation and Justification of Rules for Managers and Business Organizations, a Professional Ethics Perspective. Before I get into the detail of my presentation, right at the outset, I wish to thank the organizers, especially Dr. Charles, and I wish all the participants all the very best in their presentation of papers and in their interaction. I begin with my paper. This is the abstract of my paper, and I am going to talk to you about the need for managers to understand their role in the organization, especially in regard to the application of rules which are existing in front of them whenever they perform their roles as managers. This is something very important, particularly from the ethics perspective also. In a more specific sense, if I look upon managers as professionals who are experts in their field after obtaining certain expertise, after in fact obtaining certain credentials, uh, and because of that they enjoy also certain autonomy in their work. They are expected to understand their roles in a much more responsible way, and they are in fact responsible for their not only ethical behavior but the ethical environment in the organization itself. And because of that, I bring to the fore in front of you the need to understand the role of managers in the compliance with the rules. How do they really comply with the rules, which are coming to them from different sources that I shall talk to you about. But the idea is that how do they really look upon that? How do they really comply with that? But before that, when we get into the detail, we have to understand that there are certain roles that we all perform right from the beginning as maybe brothers or sisters, or maybe as friends or as students, and this or that. And we also get to learn about certain obligations also alongside the role. Because of our social environment, of course, we get to learn about certain obligations that we get to learn about because of the roles that we perform. And then, interestingly enough, we also learn about the possible conflicts in obligations also. Whatever role we are playing, sometime there may be a conflict between one obligation of a role with the obligation of another role. That I am playing the role of a brother and I am also playing the role of a student, and there may be conflict between the two. Similarly, there can be a conflict in the obligations in the same role also. That somebody is playing the role of a manager in a business organization, and he may be coming across a conflict that may be relating to his role as an employer of certain employees in the company, and that may also coming into conflict with the role of him uh, as a manager dealing with customers, because he may be required to look into the fair wages for employees that he has to think about, and then at the same time he has to keep a check on the price of the products for customers also, and there may be some conflict in that area. So what I am trying to say that there are certain roles and there are certain obligations, and there is a possibility of certain conflict in that. Now, if there is a conflict, every time a manager cannot really sort out the conflict by going into the particular details of the conflict. Then what is the easy way? The easy way is to look into the existing rule which is applicable to the situation wherever the conflict is occurring, and he can just consult the rule and survive, in the sense that he can keep on playing the role that he is expected to play in the best way possible. Now, from where the rules are coming, that is something that we ask at this stage. The rules are coming, first of all, broadly speaking, from the laws of a country, wherever he is working. So, particularly the geographic area, wherever he is located, the laws of that particular area coming to him from the state. Second, rules of specific professions and industries. Wherever he is working, maybe as a manager in let's say software industry, then the rules of software industry will be applicable to him, that may be existing at different levels from different sources, so that he has to be familiar with. Then the third, policies and guidelines of individual organizations wherever he is employed as a manager. So certain policies, certain maybe rules, guidelines are existing around him that he has to be aware, he has to comply with. Now, the question arises, if these rules are already there, then what is the need for him? If rules are there, he can apply and just sort out the conflict and live his life well as a manager. What is the problem? The problem is that still we have to look for the room for ethics in his working, in his behavior. And that can come only from the ability, or maybe the cultivated ability, that we are seeking from a manager as a matter of ethical requirement, that he should be able to interpret and justify rules. Interpretation and justification of rules, these are the two very important reasons for him to realize that yes, he has to be aware. The simply blindly following the rules will not be enough. He has to learn to interpret, because the rules are general and he has to apply that in a particular situation. So he has to learn how to really interpret the rules in the best way possible, in the very morally correct way possible. And that is one requirement. Because, for example, the freedom of expression, that may be a rule existing as a law, or maybe existing as a rule in the profession, or maybe existing as a guideline in the company or the organization that he's working. Now he has to be very clear about that, that how to really go about with the interpretation. Now he cannot be too rigid about freedom of expression. He cannot be too liberal about also. Something Aristotelian I am trying to indicate, that he has to learn to follow the path of middle, not too rigid, not too permissive, not that way. So that way he has to be very careful, because otherwise any extreme or any deficiency may, because any excess or any deficiency, any extreme of, for that matter, may be leading to that situation of leading to that situation of um, possessing a vice. That is something that he has to be clear. The virtue will come in the middle, where he is able to rationally interpret the rule in the best way possible. That is the sign of virtue that he can cultivate. And then coming to the second part, that is justification of rules. Now, this is something he has to be very clear that, first of all, the rule itself um, may be ethically not justifiable. So that way he has to check it whether the rule itself is ethically justifiable or not. For example, there may be a rule that may be somewhere giving justification to uh, less pay to women employees, and that may be appearing to be morally unjustifiable. Or the other possibility is that the rule is not existing at all, but still he has to be ethically informed. For example, sometime before there was no rule regarding this child labor. Still, he was morally required to take care into account that he cannot employ children. That is a sign of exploitation. So that way he has to be clear about the justification of rules also. So these two reasons are very much required for him to analyze situations in a critical and logical manner, and that is making sense in line with the current trend of democratization of professional organizations. What does it mean? It means that he is now progressively, we see that he is now in a position not only to apply the rules independently, but he is also in a position to participate in the formulation of rules also. Now, because of that democratic spirit that we increasingly observe in the companies or organizations, he is well expected to be able to interpret and to be able to see the justification of rules in the best way possible. Now, when he is doing these two, what is the standard after all when he is interpreting or looking into the very point of justification? What could be the standard of ethical inquiry that he is conducting for the sake of interpretation and justification? So there are suggestions, of course. One is that he may be judging it purely for the sake of his own self-interest. That is something naturally, not only to managers, even to all of us, that we have to learn. That maybe in his case, he's always trying to interpret the rule which is favoring his own career advancement in the organization. So that may not be really making any sense, because moral interest is much more significant than self-interest. That he has to realize, and we want to point out that. Because self-interest may not be serving the whole idea of moral interest at all. And the second candidate is common opinion. In general, what people are saying in the company, or in general, what his colleagues are saying, or what his seniors are saying, that is common opinion that he can just look upon and try to interpret the rule, or maybe look for the justification of the rule. Now, this is something that he can try. But again, there may be something wrong. Maybe all the people are believing in the company that newly recruited workers may not be given equal pay, may not be given the fair wages, may not be given the minimum prescribed wages which the law is requiring. So that may be appearing to be the dominating view in the company, but still that is morally wrong. Anybody can see that. So generally what we see that common opinion is favoring the either the employees or the employers, nothing more than that. So somewhere he has to come out of that also. Then what is the idea? The idea is that the third candidate is making sense in that regard, that he has to take into account the idea of ethical truth. That is important, that he has to find the ethical truth in his judgment when he's interpreting the rule, when he's looking for justification of the rule. That has to be objective ethical truth. That is the real standard of ethical inquiry that he is trying to look upon for the sake of moral correctness in his conduct as a manager. Objective in the sense that something equal to 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That is holding the somewhere, not really relying upon his liking, somewhere not relying upon his maybe feelings, somewhere not relying upon his own maybe um, that way having some taste for something. It's not like that. It cannot be subjective. It has to be objective. Something close to mathematical truth. And so long as he is not able to find the truth, he has to really rely upon the approximation to that objective ethical truth. And there is an idea that the truth may be also coming if the tools are correctly applied. For example, we get to see in the case of ethical theory, which is appearing to be as an ethical tool. In the case of utilitarian ethical approach, which is saying that maximum happiness of maximum number of people. So that is giving to me or to the manager that, okay, this is the tool that somebody can apply to really move towards objective ethical truth in the judgment. So this is something that he has to comply with in order to stick to the point of being ethical in his behavior for the sake of his own aspiration to live a good human life and to ensure ethical environment in the organization wherever he is employed. So we may conclude with this, that the managers need to develop the ability to interpret and justify rules in their organization in a morally correct manner, which requires them to think in a clear and logical manner, purely at the level of being human. And more than anything else, they need this to pass through the standard of objective ethical truth for its own sake, even if it helps everybody or nobody concerned in the bargain. That is something that is the main point that I wish to emphasize in the whole paper. Thank you. Thank you.